Everybody wants to be original. Nobody wants to admit they're recycling. That's the funny part. We romanticize creativity like it's some mystical event. A genius sits alone in a dark room, struck by divine inspiration, and suddenly creates something the world has never seen before. Meanwhile, reality is usually, yeah, I stole half this idea from a documentary, a psychology book, 2 comedians, a Japanese convenience store, and a bloke on Reddit with 14 followers. That's far closer to how creativity actually works, and smart people understand this earlier than everyone else. They stop obsessing over originality and start obsessing over patterns. Because once you study enough successful people, companies, artists, creators, movements, and ideas, you realize civilization itself is basically one giant remix. Nothing appears from nowhere, everything builds on something else. Music samples older music, movies retell ancient myths. Religion borrowed symbols from older religions. Politics steals from marketing, marketing steals from psychology, self-help steals from philosophy. Silicon Valley keeps inventing things Japanese cities solved in 1997. Human beings are basically very sophisticated remix machines. And weirdly, understanding this removes a huge amount of pressure, because one of the biggest things stopping smart people from creating is perfectionism disguised as originality. They think, if my idea isn't completely unique, maybe it's not worth making. Absolute creative death sentence, because if you set the standard at never before seen human innovation, you'll spend your life paralyzed, waiting, researching, planning, thinking, talking about creating, instead of actually building anything. And intelligent people are especially vulnerable to this trap. Because smart people can see complexity, they can see flaws early, they can see similarities. So they kill their own ideas before they've even started. Oh, someone already did that. Cool. And someone already made burgers before McDonald's. Someone already made phones before Apple. Someone already made self-help before literally everybody on YouTube with a beige microphone set up. The question isn't, has this ever existed before? The question is, can you execute it better, differently, more clearly, more honestly, or for a different audience? That's the game. And honestly, most people completely misunderstand what stealing ideas actually means. Amateurs copy appearance, smart people copy principles, massive difference. An amateur YouTuber sees a successful creator and copies the thumbnails, the editing, the fonts, the music, the dramatic zoom cuts, the fake shocked face. That's surface level theft. And usually it fails because they copied the decoration instead of the psychology. Smart people go deeper. They ask, why does this hook work? Why did that story hold attention? Why does this product spread? Why did this brand create loyalty? Why do people emotionally connect to this? That's where the gold is, because human psychology repeats constantly. Attention repeats, fear repeats, status repeats, belonging repeats, curiosity repeats. People change clothes every decade, but emotionally we're still basically cave monkeys with Wi-Fi, which means patterns transfer between industries constantly. And this is where things get really interesting. A smart nightclub promoter can learn from Disneyland queue systems. A fitness coach can learn from video game addiction loops. A YouTuber can learn from stand-up comedians. A politician can learn from cult leaders. A marketer can learn from religion. Honestly, half of modern marketing is just ancient tribal psychology wearing a Patagonia vest. And once you start noticing this, you realize the smartest people in the room are often obsessive collectors. Not inventors, collectors. They collect hooks, systems, emotional triggers, storytelling frameworks, business models, audience psychology, communication patterns, incentives, timing mechanisms. Then they remix them. That's creativity, not magic combination. Even Steve Jobs understood this. People quote, good artists copy, great artists steal. But most people misunderstand it. They think it means plagiarism. It doesn't. Jobs wasn't saying copy homework. He meant absorb ideas deeply enough that they become part of your own thinking. Apple itself did this constantly. The graphical user interface came from Xerox PARC. The smartphone built on existing technologies. Even the iPod wasn't the first MP3 player. Apple just combined things better. Cleaner, simpler, more emotionally compelling. That's often what innovation really is, not inventing atoms, rearranging atoms intelligently. And honestly, the internet has made this even more obvious, because now we can study success in real time. You can reverse engineer viral videos, business models, storytelling, persuasion, product design, audience retention, consumer psychology for free, which is incredible. But there's a downside too. People now consume inspiration endlessly without transforming it into output. They become creative hoarders, like intellectual dragons sitting on piles of bookmarked content, watching productivity videos instead of producing, studying writing instead of writing, researching business ideas for 7 years while earning exactly $0. At some point, you have to stop collecting ingredients and cook something. And this is where another important distinction matters. There's a difference between inspiration, imitation, and integration. Inspiration says, that sparked something in me. Imitation says, I'll copy this exactly. Integration says, I understand the underlying principles and can adapt them naturally. That third one is where smart people operate. Because eventually your influences stop looking obvious. They blend together. You're no longer copying one person. You're synthesizing hundreds of inputs into something uniquely filtered through your personality. That's where authentic style actually comes from. Not isolation, exposure. Austin Kleon talks about this brilliantly in Steal Like an Artist. And he's right. The most dangerous myth in creativity is the myth of total originality because it stops people participating. It turns creativity into elitism. Like only special chosen geniuses are allowed to contribute. Absolute rubbish. Most great work is iterative, most innovation is evolutionary, even science works this way. Newton literally said, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. Translation, I've borrowed heaps of ideas, that's humanity. And there's something else smart people understand, stealing patterns reduces risk massively. This matters in business especially. Dumb people often try to reinvent entire systems because their ego wants originality. Smart people ask, where has this already worked? That question alone can save years of pain. Because success leaves clues. Patterns repeat constantly. The problem is, most people are emotionally attached to feeling unique. They want the fantasy of being misunderstood visionaries. But honestly, sometimes you're not a misunderstood genius. Sometimes you just haven't learned enough patterns yet. That's a much less sexy answer, but usually a more useful one. And look, there's obviously a line. Lazy plagiarism is weak. Mindless copying creates soulless work. You can feel it instantly. But learning from great ideas, that's intelligence. That's humility. That's recognizing humans are collaborative creatures, whether we admit it or not. Even your personality is partially borrowed. Your humor, your language, your beliefs, your taste, your worldview. Most of it was absorbed from somewhere. We are all assembled, not invented. And honestly, that should feel liberating. You do not need to sit in a cave waiting for divine originality before creating something valuable. You need curiosity, awareness, taste, pattern recognition, and enough courage to remix what inspires you. Because in the modern world, originality is often just intelligent combination. And the people screaming loudest about being completely original, usually just haven't studied history deeply enough to recognize their own sources.